Okay, well, happy Tu B'Shvat Sameach for those, I feel like on Facebook, for those of my friends who celebrate. I say this because I haven't connected well with Tu B'Shvat in recent years, probably because there's no children around. And although for many, many years, Tu B'Shvat for me and my congregation was an Earth Day, I'm talking already in the 90s. We were celebrating as a day of environmental awareness. But I don't know. It's just getting lost for me. It's not around. So everybody enjoy yourselves and don't get too distracted by the less serious parts of Tu B'Shvat and take some time to look at a tree and to connect with nature. To connect with nature, and whether that's through apricots, dried fruit from Israel or from otherwise or from Turkey, where it usually comes from. Uh, by the way, one of the ironic thing was when I realized when I got to Israel that most dried fruit that we just assume was Israeli food, Israeli dried fruit, comes from Turkey. But it doesn't mean it's any less powerful from okay, well, people still coming in. Okay, so if this was last week, I would have connected Tu B'Shvat to Daniel's cross interrogation where he says, "Under which tree were you standing?" There you go. Thank you, Type. Okay. All right. So a few new people here. We still have that problem there. Okay. So welcome those we haven't seen before. I haven't seen before. I think David and Helen, perhaps, perhaps others. We are in the middle of a mini series, uh, which is not a problem, but a mini series about women in the Apocryphal literature. And we hope to move on when we finish that this month during February and March to at least some aspects of women in the New Testament. The today is self-contained, and even next week. The truth is these are things where I think we everybody can get something out of it. And are these are recorded as well, right? And they're up, Madalena, these are up on the website, all of these things?
Yes, yes, all the recordings and on our YouTube channel.
Okay. All right then. So Judith, I sent you guys sent everybody a kind of a one-page summary and an outline. The outline in this case is interesting because it is chiastic. That means it's shaped like a chi, a Greek letter chi, and ABBA in this case A B C D E E D C B A. And you'll see that half of the book has nothing to do with Judith. Right, so we're not reading the whole book. That would take us a long time. It's going to take us a long time just to get through the material that I want to get through today and next week as well, and and hopefully we will. Just a few words to to frame this. This is absolutely ahistorical, right? The historical value in Judith is giving us a window into what some people were thinking and writing about in the late second, early first century BCE, which is where it's dated to. The names are some of them are not found anywhere else. Some of them are found and are very well known. And for instance, the biggest thing is the book starts with telling us about Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Assyria, and I think many people know that Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylonia. And Holofernes, who I don't think his name shows up anywhere else. Um, so it's a fairy tale, it's a folk tale in order to teach us something. And what we're looking at in this today and next week is what do we think, what do I think Judith wants to teach us about other biblical characters, other female characters in the Bible. And I go back to what I said about Shoshana and what we said about Esther in the additions to the Septuagint additions to the book of Esther is that if Esther and other women were not necessarily great role models, here you've got this publishing house. I'm being facetious, but the men are publishing books or putting out books, writing books, at least that we have footsteps that we have traces of in the late first millennium BCE, who are giving us different kinds of female role models. And if somebody were to ask Esther being a role model because the book is in the Hebrew Bible, as is Ruth, as is other books, but Esther, it's right there. And there's a holiday that's celebrated. I don't know if it was celebrated in the second century BCE, but it's celebrated already in rabbinic times. If forget the tale, forget the story that we've already brought up already, that she's married to a non-Jewish man and she's sleeping with him, and that she's living in a non-Jewish palace with probably not kosher food. And it doesn't say that she was eating vegetarian the way that it tells us in the book of Daniel that he was eating vegetarian. She's doing a lot of stuff which isn't terribly kosher. But even aside from that, what's her name, right? Where does the name Esther come from? Anybody?
Isn't it
Ishtar.
Ishtar?
Yeah, Ishtar, Astarte, one of those, right? But she and Mordecai, whose name comes from Marduk, they're the him and her gods, right? They're. It's like I don't know what it'd be like today. I don't want to offend anybody because I found moving to the United States that a number of Jews have names that I always thought were Christian names, but it's like, Christina and Christopher are married together. Maybe that's not a good analogy, but and of course, what is our heroine's name? Her name is Yehudit. Now we have to take a step back and say, not get too excited, which means Jewish woman, right? Or Jewess, the way they used to write, right? A Jewess. Um, we have to be a little careful with that, only because Aesop has a wife named Judith as well, which is ironic for those that read in Breshit, and the name comes up another time, at least I think in the Hebrew Bible. But still, I think it's pretty obvious that we want a new role model for a female role model, and her name is absolutely is Jewish person or Jewish woman. Tybal, do you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, and I think it's ironic you're commenting on American names when Israelis use things like Nimrod.
Okay.
Who would wish Nimrod the meaning of the name, or even not naming after someone not born in the month of Sivan and it's Sivan?
Okay, three different categories. I'm going to respond to you, and we want to wish Sylvia refuah shlema, refuat nefesh, refuat guf. May everything go well, and may you be healed soon, Sylvia. In response to names, so let's take the Sivan thing first. So Sivan, not in the month of Sivan. I don't have much to say, but it doesn't feel like it's ideological. Whereas Esther, I don't know. It doesn't, Sivan, okay, so maybe it's not exact. As far as names like Nimrod and Hagar in modern Hebrew, that was conscious. That was conscious to say we're not dosim, we're not Orthodox Israelis. We're new Israelis. We're Israelis who do not necessarily think that the Judaism, which was established by the rabbis of the Talmud, because Nimrod is not a bad guy, as I imagine in the Torah itself. Nimrod becomes a bad guy in the Midrash. Now, his name is asking for it because his name has the word mered in it, which means rebellion. But and look, there's a lot of things to be said about names, and we're never going to be exact, but in the same way that Ruth surely comes from the word re'ut, friendship, and Boaz's name comes from strength, and so on and so forth. We have so many names where the names are very, very important. In the background, I think it's relevant here that Yehudit. I don't have anything to say about the other names, but Yehudit is so, except for the tribe that Yehudit is from. Yes, Rabbi Malka.
Thinking about the name Zerubbabel in the Tanakh too.
So Zerubbabel is a positive character in the Tanakh. So
Right, but he has the name the seed of Babel.
yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah. The whole Second Temple name thing is an interesting thing. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, or or for that matter, Rabbi Ishmael, right? If we zoom forward centuries. Okay, let's get back to Yehudit if we can. My fault. All the distractions are always coming from me. I realize that. So we have this book, this story that begins with a very petty king who is taking revenge for the people that didn't bow, that didn't bow to his power. Uh, if you look, I don't know if anybody has the outline, but you don't really need it. But I think it was labeled Judith Part One, maybe. Um, it- first there's a campaign against the nations that did not, bow to his will, and then Israel is in the pathway of everything, so they're greatly terrified. Um, Joachim prepares for war. Joachim here is not the king; he's the high priest, and that's going to come in our part of the story as well, in Judah, in the second part of the story. Holofernes, who is his greatest general, plans for the attack and talks with Achior, and Achior tries to Achior is one of his generals or colonels or whatever, or his wise people, tries to convince him that you're not going to win against the Israelites, because the Israelites don't get defeated by force. They're defeated if they sin. If they sin, then God will allow them to be defeated. If not, God will protect them. He's therefore kicked out of the Assyrian camp. He's delivered, tied up to the city of Bethulia. Bethulia, perhaps that's Beit El, perhaps that's Betulia. The Greek translations, the versions of Greek have all different kinds of spelling for this. Nobody knows exactly, but the thinking of Beth El would be it's kind of there's a conflation in this book of the northern kingdom and Judea, right? So we don't want to look too careful. We don't want to look for contradictions. They're all over the place from the Hebrew Bible. But maybe Beit El symbolizing the holy place of the northern kingdom, and that's why it's called Beit El. Others have said, I think already, I think I saw a source, though, a pre-modern source. It says Betulia, Betulaya, the Virgin of God. Judith, that intimating that that's who she is. She's a virgin of God. We'll talk about that in a second. And then, so now turning back the other way from the chiastic structure, Achior talks to the people, that is the Israelite people who are in Betuel, and Holofernes prepares for war, and once again Israel's greatly terrified, and a campaign, a war. And so that explains the structure if you're looking at the structure, but that's the background. The background is, and that's like half the book, right? A little bit less than half the book is about something that has nothing to do with Judith, that doesn't mention Judith even. Judith is not introduced until chapter 8, and that's what we're going to do today. So that's I'm setting it up. The background is the people of Israel, symbolized by the people in this one city or village, are terrified. They're up against destruction. This is a story that Israelites, Jews, people of the Hebrew background have known time and time again. So many different stories, so many different books that tell this same template. And here it is again. They're up against the wall. How are they going to get out of it? And that's the background for our story. Okay, that took perhaps a little bit. No, that's all right. 15 minutes for that. Any comments or questions before we get to the actual text of today, which is Judith and a little bit about her life? Okay, then. So you can set aside that first page and now go to the second page that says at the top of it, Judith Part 1, but I think the file was called Judith Part 2. I'm sorry. Sometimes it's, yeah, yeah. I mean, okay. So shall we begin? Megan, would you like to read from us the chapter 8? The big 8 there means chapter 8 of Judith. Once again, Judith is found in the Apocryphal literature, which is in the part of the canon, what I call the canon. Others don't call it the canon, but what I call the canon of the Alexandrian Jewish community. It means it was sacred literature for those folks. And yeah, and so let's go on. Yeah, we have it in various versions, lots of different Greek versions, and there is I don't remember. No, that's Tobit is the Hebrew Aramaic version. No, I don't think there's anything Semitic. Okay, anyway, that's not our topic. Our topic is the character of Judith. Megan, if you would.
Now in those days Judith heard about these things. She was the daughter of Merai, son of Oz, son of Joseph, son of Oziel, son of Elkiah, son of Aeneas, son of Gideon, son of Raphaim, son of Hatub, son of Elijah, son of Halikiah, son of Eliab, son of Nathaniel, son of Samael, son of Zurizzaradai, son of Shimon, son of Israel. Her husband Manasseh, who belonged to her tribe and family, had died during the barley harvest. For as he stood overseeing those who were binding sheaves in the field, he was overcome by burning heat and took to his bed and died in his town of Bethulia. So they buried him with his ancestors in the field between Dothan and Balamon. Judith remained as a widow for 3 years and 4 months at home, where she set up a tent for herself on the roof of her house. She put sackcloth around her waist and dressed her widow's clothing. She fasted all days of her widowhood, except the day before the Sabbath and the Sabbath itself, the day before the new moon and the day of the new moon, and the festivals of days rejoicing the house of Israel. She was beautiful in appearance and was very lovely to behold. Her husband Manasseh had left her gold and silver, male and female slaves, livestock, and fields, and she maintained this estate. No one spoke ill of her, for she feared God with great devotion.
Okay, lots of information to go on. So why don't we start like this? Reactions. What do people see? What do they feel? What do they hear? What is different from this woman than from other women that we know about from ancient Israel? Please go ahead, either speak up or raise your hand, whatever you'd like.
Well, she's well established. It seems like her husband, who died, seemed like a righteous man, hardworking man, died during the harvest, maybe overworked. She was wealthy, and she followed. It seems like she really mourned her husband, did everything right,
Everything right. Everything right. That's an interesting comment there. Everything right.
Yeah.
Whose standards, James?
Well, I think by the Jewish community standards, or by the religious
Let's be a little bit more specific. By the Jewish community. Who in the Jewish community?
Well, by the leaders, the rabbis, the priests. I don't know who would be the
Okay,
leaders.
so I'll make it easy for you. Was it more than 50% of the Jewish community?
Probably.
So that's what I'm being a troublemaker. I'm sorry, but it's a very manly view of what an ideal woman is. Let's just make sure that.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, from a feminist point of view, I think it's important for us to say that. Yes, of course we are, we're surprised she has all that gold and power and honor herself, but of course she's done the right thing, right? Not only has she done the right thing by wearing sackcloth and mourning her husband all this time, this is a few years later, but she's also remained chaste. Is that how you pronounce it? Chaste? Am I using that right? She's remaining sexually inactive. Okay. Table, you wanted to say something.
I'm sorry. Names are one of my thing, which is why I'll take responsibility for that earlier digression. But I did notice the combination of the names of Judith and Manasseh. So Judith is the template by her name for a Jewish woman, and Manasseh is a really interesting tribe name for her to be paired with.
So here her name is Menashe, but you'll notice the tribe is not Menashe.
Oh, in the English, I only see the English, which to me is transliterated the same way the tribe name is.
No, it is, but that's his name, but he's not it's like somebody whose name is Shimon who's in the tribe of Judah.
No, I get it. I just think names,
okay.
Particularly in a Judaic context, I think names have significance.
Yes.
So
in this case, I would say significance is royalty, right? Ephraim and Manasseh are part of the royalty, would you not say?
I guess I was more focusing on is the examples of brothers that got along.
Okay.
From the Friday night blessing, and that Manasseh, as the older, was clearly comfortable with Ephraim as the younger, given the bigger place in the Jewish world.
Well, at least the biblical narrator wants us to think he was perfectly comfortable. Who knows how that worked out in reality, if there was a reality. What other names do you see that? So if you're on names already, Taiba, what other names would you give some importance here? Anything else?
Well, Nathaniel's always a great name, anything with the L. Gift of God. I mean, a lot of them are not at least names that were repeated a lot elsewhere. But what else?
How about this? How about the tribe? And you've talked before in previous weeks about this particular tribe. How about this tribe that she's from? I'm sorry, you've got it. Okay, so when there's a parentheses, that means that that's my adding because that means the textual evidence is very unclear, and it's pretty clear that after Tsui Shaddai on the third line came the word son of Simon, and that's where it ends, meaning that she is from the tribe of Simon of Shimon. What
But-
might that mean?
But actually, at this point in time, Shimon's gone. It's been absorbed in Judah.
But it's not about history though, remember? It's about literary character.
But I'll push back and say the symbolism. So the woman Judith, there's a connection to the tribe of Judah.
Perhaps.
And you know, Shimon got punished because of Shimon and Levi.
What
not
did they
having
do?
impulse.
What did Shimon and Levi do?
They didn't have impulse control, as would say in the modern parlance.
Okay, that's one half of it. What's the other side of that coin?
Are you talking about why Shimon's numbers died more in the plague? Because
No, and I'm talking about the other flip side of the coin, what they had no impulse control.
Well, it was basically that they stood up for their tribe, that they were not going to let them be intermarriage. No one was going to mess with Joseph.
So they stood up for their sister, not for their tribe. The story takes place when they're still brothers and sisters. But not only that there would not be intermarriage, James, that their sister was raped, and
in their view, yeah.
So what seems to one side of it, my point was, Tybal, that I keep saying Tybal, it's Table. When one person sees a lack of impulse control, another one sees standing up for the rights of. Yeah, I'm not taking a position.
Oh, and you know what? And they're the two, whatever. And it is Tybal. It is the Yiddish.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. And you've told me at least twice, so I'm going to try to, okay. All right. So I think it's significant that she comes from the tribe, this particular tribe, because this is a tribe that has a name for being violent, just like Levi does. There's a violence in the background. They have the capability of being violent, and they have the capability in the back. They have this story in the background. I think that's why it's important that she comes from this tribe, because that tribe stood up against rape. And I want us to think of that going forward. This issue of what the author is doing, storyteller is planting these little seeds in our consciousness to think of. What else do we see here that reminds us of things from Hebrew Bible? Dan, I think you were going to say something at some point. Maybe not. No, you're off screen. Okay. Anybody else?
Well, also the fact is, before you mentioned that in the eyes of a male, she would be seeing the ideal woman. One of the things we had a talk couple months ago by Leah Hockman, and she mentioned like there's no romance or love in the Bible. I said, I mentioned a couple, stories. She said, well, the women were never really in love with the guys, but they were in love with God, that they were devoted to God. And I think you see this here, that she has this great devotion to God. And this is what makes her beautiful.
Interesting
and
point.
stand out.
I hadn't thought of that at all. Interesting, very interesting point. Okay, how about the fact that she's on the roof of a house? Reminiscent of anything, folks?
Fiddler on the Roof.
Bathsheba, yeah.
Yeah.
Ria, did you want to say something?
Rahab, wasn't she on the
Yeah. So the fact that she fasted, except for Shabbat,
That's right.
is I'd call anorexia, but somehow this is made into this romantic, very feminine thing, and it's a way of committing suicide.
Mm.
So this is I'm not sure if the authors meant it to be a standout feature kind of thing, or they were just blinded by the actual facts.
So when you say standout, I don't think that the authors thought about anorexia, were
Well, I
aware
mean,
of anorexia.
it wasn't named or anything, but the fact of women not eating as being an alluring, positive fact,
Okay.
and
So
it's not at all.
right, certainly something to bring up in our reading today. If we're reading this, if we're teachers, if we're reading with young people at all, not just young women, young people at all, this idea of weight, lots of things to be sensitive about.
Well,
Because
and it's just knowing physiology a little bit if you don't eat. I mean that, and to pull this into an extreme and a very and giving it a feminine mystique
Mhm.
about it. Um, I don't know because you don't see any in the during these writings. You don't see any understanding of the well physiology or there's a lack of understanding of people. It and this is just a standout.
Okay, but you do, in all fairness, you do see this element of fasting about men as well, holy men.
But this
Oh,
is all week, and only on Shabbat she eats.
yeah,
I mean,
I understand.
yeah,
It's a folk tale, though. If we, one way to, in other words, I hear what you're saying about us reading it today and being
yeah,
aware of this. But when
yeah,
you talk about folk tales, Hasidic rabbis over the centuries were skipping around. There's
yeah.
always been this element of fasting from Shabbat to Shabbat because in Shabbat or Rosh Chodesh you're not allowed to fast. You've got to. That's it's like the extreme piety.
Uh,
You and I don't see that as something positive, but again, it could be just the men see that as something positive. But I think that they want us to. I think the author wants us to think now of Moses and Elijah, holy people who fasted for 40 days, 40 days, 40 nights. This kind of, that's how you come into communion with God. There's also an allusion here to the story of Elijah and the woman who had, who got dressed up to go see because her child died. Long story, if anybody remembers the stories from Kings. Um, uh, and her husband says, "Why are you getting dressed up, or why are you going to the prophet? It's not Shabbat, it's not Rosh Chodesh." There's elements here that have been planted that want us to think. I think, not just me. I learned this from my teacher Zakovich, that want us to think of all sorts of biblical stories, and then want us to update what we knew about those stories with this story.
uh,
So if that was a sign of this woman, for instance, with Elijah, if that was a sign of a helpless woman, this is an update to the helpless woman syndrome. If we're thinking of, or a poor woman in the Elijah stories as well, a poor woman who's reaching out, or Ruth, who's a poor woman who needs a man's
yeah.
help. No, this is an update to that. In other words, it's kind of a jolt. We're talking now about a new woman, and hence the name Yehudit, I think, because by this time those people are already called. The term Yehudit is already used in the first and early second century, late second century BC.
Uh-huh.
Any other allusions that people see here? Oh, by the way, on the roof of the house, I think Bathsheba, you think of a woman who gave herself over to the king. As much as we understand the manipulation of David, we understand today, but she could have said no, right? You know, but we're meant to think of those kinds of things. Sex is involved here, power is involved here, helplessness is involved here, raising these issues. Um, Oh, and one more thing. In the part that we didn't read, it is presented that Israel can nothing bad can happen to Israel as long as they do God's ways, as long as they obey God, right? It's that Deuteronomic theology that we have so prevalent in for those that are studying together, Tobit as well on Thursdays, those of us. And she is the epitome of piety. She's the epitome of that, what somebody spoke before James spoke about the romance with God, right? The woman who's in love with God. Anything else? Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. Who dresses up in somebody else's, it dresses up in clothing? Tamar. So where Tamar played a role in a big role in the last story that we did in Shoshana and Susanna. There's a background of Tamar here as well, and finally, yeah, and some other women that will come up later on. Okay,
Sort of when they mentioned that her husband died during the barley harvest, made you think of Ruth.
is a reference to Ruth, right? Would you agree? Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Mhm.
Yeah, I absolutely right. Yeah, okay. All right. Susan, do you want to read for us number 9, verse 9?
Yes. When Judith heard the harsh words spoken by the people against the ruler because they were faint from lack of water, and when she heard all that Uzziah said to them and how he promised them under oath to surrender the town to the Assyrians after 5 days, she sent her maid in charge of all she possessed to summon Uzziah and Shabris and Sharmis, the elders of her town. They came to her, and she said to them, "Listen to me, rulers of the people of Bethuel. What you have said to the people today is not right. You have even sworn and pronounced this oath between God and you, promising to surrender the town to our enemies unless the Lord turns and helps us within so many days. Who are you to put God to the test today and to set yourselves up in the place of God in human affairs? You are putting the Lord Almighty to the test, but you will never learn anything. You cannot plumb the depth of the human heart or understand the workings of the human mind. How do you expect to search out God, who made all these things, and find out his mind or comprehend his thought? No, my brothers, do not anger the Lord our God. For if he does not choose to help us within these 5 days, he has the power to protect us with any time he pleases, or even destroy us in the presence of our enemies. Do not try to bind the purposes of the Lord our God, for God is not like a human being to be threatened, or like a mere mortal to be won over by pleading. Therefore, while we wait for his deliverance, let us call upon him to help us, and he will hear our voice if it pleases him.
Okay. So it's not a prayer, right? We've seen in other apocryphal and the apocryphal additions to biblical books that prayers are inserted very often where at some point in the history, history of theology of the Jewish people, somebody says, why aren't they praying? Because there's not a lot of prayer, personal prayer in the narratives of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible. So this is not a prayer, though. This is a speech to the leadership. So Uzziah and Chambers and Sharmis, they are They are the local leadership. He's the one in the part that we didn't read beforehand who says, we're going to give in. Because we can't take the siege anymore. We're thirsty. We're going to give it 5 more days. Why the 5 days? I don't remember why that's I don't remember why not just give in right away. Of course, if they gave in right away, there would be no room for this story to happen. She needs to have the 5 days for her to work, so it's needed for the plot. And and what she's saying to them, she's the rabbi, she's the prophet, saying, "You men, you don't understand how God works. You've got to pray. It's all in God's. You can't give in, but you also can't fight because that's ridiculous. One little town against, hundreds of thousands of soldiers and cavalry, and so she's reprimanding them, okay, and so let's go on a little bit more with this. Yes, Chuck.
Comment at the end of this, it says, God cannot be won over by pleading, so let's plead with him. Let's pray to him. Well, wait a minute, that's a conflict right there.
Yeah. No, it got it. It doesn't. I think that it's. Yeah. I'd have to look at the Greek. We'd have to see if the pleading here is more like bargaining. You're trying to manipulate, trying to bargain. Malka, why don't you say you've got something to say, and I'll quickly look and see if Moore has a comment on
In
that.
verse 12, talking about allusions to other stories in the Tanakh. In verse 12, am I in the place, put yourself in the place of God? It reminded me of two stories. When Rachel pleads to her husband, he give me children, or I shall die. And then he answers, am I in the place of God? And
Right.
also the story when Joseph meets his brothers and he's saying that he's not in the place of God. It just reminded me of those two stories.
Right. And in both of those stories, God is working very much in the background to make things happen, whether it's bringing a baby or whether it's, Joseph coming up and, and saving the rest of the people. So I think another translation here, other than here, is let me read Moore's translation, which is directly from the Greek. This is the New Revised Standard Version, what we've been reading here. And let's see if this helps us out. But as for you, do not impose conditions on the Lord our God, for God is not to be threatened as a man or to be cajoled. Yeah, or to be cajoled as a mere mortal. Rather, as we wait for God's deliverance, let us call upon God to help us. God will listen to our voice if he is so disposed. That makes more sense, right, Chuck? Yeah, that's one of our challenges. One of our challenges is we're not doing this in the original. We don't know if it's the original language, but in any of the altar, it's through different filters and in different, not even generations, in different decades. Sometimes American English changes how it's done, and also the translators, the new Revised Standard Version are not. They're not as going as deeply as a commentary like Carrie Moore's commentary that I've been using, Anchor Bible, which I am so happy to use it. Over the years, I have that you can see how over the years I've been looking up verses in this, but it's interesting. I have taught different parts of Judith before, but it's just great to, I can tell when I bought a book sometimes by the phone number that I put, because I was taking these books all over Jerusalem, whatever. And sometimes the phone numbers are the number that we had in the 80s in Jerusalem that had only 6 digits to it. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay, but good eye, good eye, good eye. So Chuck, why don't you go ahead and read for us from 18?
Read 18. Okay. For never in our generation, nor in these present days, has there been any tribe or family or people or town of ours that worships gods made with hands as was done in days gone by. That was why our ancestors were handed over to the sword and to the pillage, and so they suffered a great catastrophe before our enemies. But we know no other God but him. And so we hope that he will disdain us or any of our people.
He will not disdain us.
He will not disdain us or any of our people. For if we are captured, all Judea will fall, and our sanctuary will be plundered, and he will make us pay for its destruction with our blood. The slaughter of our kindred, and the captivity of the land, and the desolation of our inheritance, all this he will bring on our heads among the nations.
Two more lines.
Yes, two more lines. Wherever we serve as slaves, and we shall be an offense and a disgrace in the eyes of those who acquire us. For our slavery will not bring us into favor, but the Lord our God will turn it to dishonor. That seems
Okay,
kind
so
of obvious.
this is a woman who knows her history, right? Her history, what we call the Deuteronomic history of the reward and punishment, the history that the attitude in which the Hebrew historiography that we have from the Torah itself to Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings, which ends in the destruction of the temple. All this kind of stuff. She's kind of like saying, first of all, learn your lessons from history. Stop. We have to make sure that we're pure. We've got to pray to God, but also don't think that being taken captive is a good thing. That's not a good thing. That will lead to the bizayon, the dishonor, but it's stronger than dishonor of our people. Malka, is your hand up now from before, or did you want to say something?
Oh, I forgot to put it down.
Oh, okay. All right. Any comments on this section?
Yeah, when you're talking about, going back to Simon and Levi and Tamar, back with Tamar, one of the reasons the brothers attacked from the other standpoint is that the king, the prince's father, he convinced the people that eventually they will take over they would take over Jacob's family, not just through intermarriage, but through everything. And that was originally the plan behind for the king to marry off his son, that eventually he convinced his people that we will be able to overtake them.
Okay.
And it's interesting.
We're talking about Dinah, though. We're not talking about Tamar.
Not Dinah, sorry, Dinah. And that was and here she talks about the same thing, but don't give in because we're going to be overtaken. And it's kind of like a little bit of the same philosophy there between, Simon and Levi, and she comes from the tribe, as you said, of Simon, and know your history, that this was the basis of the Dinah story.
Yeah. So if we go back a second in this Deuteronomic thinking to what Tybal has mentioned a few times about Simon today and also once before in one of our previous, that the tribe of Simon disappeared. It was absorbed by Judah. That's a historical fact. We can see that from looking at the various documents over the centuries during biblical times. That too in itself is a lesson perhaps in this Deuteronomic thinking, that if you fight irrationally, in other words, it's not that you don't fight, but if you're not clever about it and don't do it in the right way, and Simon and Levi, there was nothing theological about what they did. It was impulse, whatever somebody said, they had no way to control their impulse. You will in the end you'll disappear, and so yes, these are important connections that the narrator wants us to make in the background of our reading, the way that all books do that, all TV, movies do that. But let's continue. Let's see how far we can get before we finish today. Dan, you want to read a little bit for us? 24.
Therefore, my brothers, let us set an example for our kindred, for their lives depend upon us, and the sanctuary, both the temple and the altar, rests upon us. In spite of everything, let us give thanks to the Lord our God, who is putting us to the test as he did our ancestors. Remember what he did with Abraham and how he tested Isaac, and what happened to Jacob in Syria and Mesopotamia. Well, while he was tending the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother. For he has not tried us with fire as he did them to search their hearts, nor has he taken vengeance on us, but the Lord scourges those who are close to him in order to admonish them.
Okay. So a few things here. Some of the connections are explicit by names. While we think of Abraham being, and remind me to say something about the temple that's come up in the previous paragraph. But anyway, back if we always think of Abraham as and it's set and God tested Abraham. So we don't have a line in Genesis that says and God tested Isaac, but it's kind of being tested when you're you're being put on the altar. There's a test involved there, and then it could be also Isaac and both that and Isaac was his whole life was being tested. His two sons, everything. I mean, the whole thing. All of Genesis is a big test, right? Um, and the same thing with Yaakov having to go to Padan Aram, which here is listed as Syria and Mesopotamia, but that's that's where it is. And mentioning Lavan, all these things, all these stories, these are not just hinted at. These are explicitly said here. Remember, all of our forefathers, interesting, there's no foremothers here, but forefathers were tested in this way. We too are being tested. And finally, the last line, but the Lord scourges those who are close to him in God in order to admonish them. Ring a bell, anybody? It's almost a direct quote. After God kills Aaron's two sons for offering foreign fire. And the text says, and Moses said, and that's what God means when God deals this way with the ones who God feels close. It's almost a direct quote from that particular verse. So that too is being brought. In other words, you're playing with fire. Now, why do they mention if it's Bethuel or Betul Yael, whatever the place is called? Why does it keep mentioning this paragraph before the temple and the sanctuary? We're used to thinking of, well, for the north there was Bethel, and for for Judah there was the temple in Jerusalem. Well, everything's been conflated together. As I said, it's ahistorical, absolutely ahistorical, and so Bethuel here is presented as the last. In other words, if we fall, the temple in Jerusalem will be destroyed as well. Right? So don't think historically, this is totally ahistorical, but this is how it's being presented here. We're the last wall, the last barrier for the enemy to destroy the temple. Yes, Tybal.
So you said Bethel, which was in the south of the northern kingdom, but you didn't say Dawn?
No, because the text doesn't say done. The text says Bethel. I said it could allude.
Oh, got it.
Could be hinting at Bethel, but Dotan that's mentioned here is not there. Dotan's in the hillsides. So
I didn't mean Dotan. I meant Don.
No, I know you did. Don isn't mentioned here at all, but okay. I can't tell you why. Because
I think of them as paired.
Yes, in biblical literature they are paired, but we're beyond that, and he's not exact. The author here he's like taking stuff from all over the place. So what I said about Dotan. It can't be Beitel. If it's Beitel, it's not Dotan. They're in different areas. Continue. And also the whole thing, not only is it ahistorical, it's geographical, if there's such a word. And it's ironic because in Moore's commentary, there's a whole there's like pages and pages of maps, which I think is funny. But I think, maybe that's what he needed to show why it's not geographical. Go ahead, Dana. Let's do another paragraph, if you would.
Okay.
28.
Yeah, okay. Then Uzziah said to her, all that you have said was spoken out of a true heart, for there's no one who can deny your words. Today is not the first time your wisdom has been shown, but from the beginning of your life, all the people have recognized your understanding, for your heart's disposition is right. But the people were so thirsty that they compelled us to do for them what we have promised and made us take an oath that we cannot break. Now, since you are a God-fearing woman, pray for us so that the Lord may send us rain to fill our cisterns. Then we will no longer feel faint from thirst.
Okay, interesting twist here. You are, of course, right. You've been right all of your life, which we could understand as being facetious as well, of course, right? But I think it's meant to be, you're right. But our hands were tied. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Our hands were tied. They compelled us to do this for them. When Moses comes down from the mountain and the golden calf, and that's what Aaron says. It's not my fault. They made me do it. Very common thing. But again, the people. Where is leadership? What is leadership? And we need the rain. But and praying for rain to come down, fill the cisterns. Back to Elijah and the prophets of the Baal. There's a lot of ways to solve problems. And all this is setting it up. All the biblical references here are setting us up to think of all those things, because going forward, it's going to be a rather unique solution to the problem. Okay, relatively unique. Not unique, but relatively unique. Okay. So Eileen, do you want to read the 32?
Then Judith said to them, "Listen to me. I am about to do something that will go down through all generations to our people. Stand at the town gate tonight so that I may go out with my maid. And within the days after which you have promised to surrender the town to our enemies, the Lord will deliver Israel by my hand. Only do not try to find out what I am doing, for I will not tell you until I have finished what I am about to do." Uzziah and the rulers said to her, "Go in peace, and may the Lord God go before you, to take vengeance on our enemies." So they returned from the tent and went to their posts.
Okay, let's take a little break here. An interesting way for a narrator to keep the suspense in the plot, keep the plot suspense. Have one of the characters say, "And don't even ask me, I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen." Interesting way, just from a literary point of view. I'm not going to tell you, but of course that brings what is going to happen. Our greatest and maybe some of you have never read this, never heard of the story. I doubt it. I think everybody somehow heard something about this story, but just imagine what it's like to hear it for the first time.
Mm.
Just imagine. Okay. Let's squeeze in another few if we can. Who do we have? James, you want to read for us? We're at the beginning of chapter 9. We just need you to unmute, James.
Okay. Then Judith prostrated herself, put ashes on her head, and uncovered the sackcloth she was wearing. At the very time when the evening incense was being offered in the house of God in Jerusalem, Judith cried out to the Lord with a loud voice and said, "O Lord God of my ancestor Simon, to whom you gave a sword to take revenge on those strangers who had torn off a virgin's clothing to defile her and expose her thigh, to put her to shame and profane her womb to disgrace her. For you said it shall not be done, yet they did it. So you gave up their rulers to be killed, and their bed, which was ashamed of the deceit they have practiced and was stained with blood, and you struck down slaves along with the princes and princess on their throne. And you gave up their wives for the plunder and their daughters to captivity, and all those spoils to be divided among your beloved children who burned with zeal for you and abhorred the pollution of their blood and called on you for help. O God, my God, hear me also, a widow."
Okay, so you got to read exactly the story you were talking about, right?
Right. Yeah.
But told in a different way. If we were to, it'd be interesting to compare this passage we just looked at with the story in Genesis. That's a lovely example of inner biblical midrash, if you include this in the Bible. And it's a rewriting of the story from a different viewpoint, a different, more of a Shimon Dicke viewpoint, one might say, and pretty graphic as well. And of all the things to remember, of all the things to remember of biblical literature, of stories of the people, that before she's going out to battle, this is the one. I can think of one, well, afterwards, well, I'll say another parallel, which doesn't seem to, it's up here in the background, but of all the things she could think about, all the trials, this is the one she does. She wants us to think of rape, of sex, of physicality. Yes, Taiba.
Were you thinking of Pinchas, who was also from the tribe
Yeah,
of
yeah.
Shimon?
No, Pinchas is not from, it's actually Zimri who's from Shimon,
Oh, sorry.
but Pinchas is a Kohen. That too is probably in the background. You know, the name Merari is in there as well, which is a Levite name in her lineage. So that's probably in the background as well. I, what was I thinking of? Okay, it slipped my mind right when you asked the question, what I was going to respond. Okay. But let's go on a little bit. James, why don't you continue with her prayer, her prayer, verse 5?
For you have done these things, and those that went before, and those that follow. You have designed the things that are now and those that are to come. What you had in mind has happened. The things you've decided on present and presented themselves and said, here we are. For all your ways are prepared in advance, and your judgment is with foreknowledge.
Right, which is an interesting theological concept, right? Right. How could there be free choice if everything's known beforehand? Maybe, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking, we're when you were talking about that they were going to be overtaken. One of the things that we don't really think about a lot, but when armies overtake another, culture, there's a lot of rape that goes on.
Exactly.
This is maybe why she didn't want to give in to beginning, because you talk about, you don't think about these, but horrible things happen to the victims.
Yeah,
Even in Judaism, we have that whole thing about, if a soldier takes a woman or find, he's to allow her to mourn for 30 days.
right.
You and I think that this is somewhat behind it. When you think about this, is one of the reasons why she wants to stand up, because the outcome will not be good for the women in the long run, and she knows it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good point. And it'll become even stronger as we move on. Okay. Dan, do us a favor. Why don't you, let's try to finish up the chapter. And if you could speed us up a little bit. We're at verse 7, and we'll at least get to the end of chapter 9.
Here now are the Assyrians, a greatly increased force, priding themselves in their horses and riders, boasting in the strength of their foot soldiers, and trusting in shield and spear and bow and sling. They do not know that you are the Lord who crushes wars. The Lord is your name. Break their strength by your might and bring down their power in your anger. For they intend to profane your sanctuary and to pollute the tabernacle where your glorious name resides, and to break off the horns of your altar with the sword. Look at their pride and send your wrath upon their heads. Give to me, a widow, the strong hand to do what I plan. By the deceit of my lips, strike down the slave with the prince and the prince with his attendant. Crush their arrogance by the hand of a woman. For your strength does not depend on numbers, nor your might on the powerful. But you are the God of the lowly, helper of the oppressed, upholder of the weak, protector of the forsaken, savior of those without hope. Please, please, God of my father, God of the heritage of Israel, Lord of heaven and earth, creator of the waters, king of all your creation, hear my prayer. Make my deceitful words bring wound and bruise on those who will plan cruel things against your covenant and against your sacred house and against Mount Zion and against the house your children possess. Let your whole nation and every tribe know and understand that you are God, the God of all power and might, and that there is no other who protects the people of Israel but you alone.
Okay. Any comments before we wind up today?
That's a prayer in spades. Really.
It
Very
reminds me of
explicit.
so many prayers in the Tanakh, like, well, your strength does not depend on numbers, but you are God. I love. It reminds me of the Amidah.
Yeah. There's an allusion here to Egypt, the Egyptian
Mhm.
army with the horses chasing
Horses.
after them, and God is your name, a quote from this last week's Torah portion. Um, the
And when
arrogance,
Moses has to, when he says, if you destroy your people, what are the nations going to think? And when that's
Mhm.
what she's making that point to. If you do this, your name is gonna be profaned among the nations.
Yeah. So I'll make this one interesting point, which is not to the character of women here, which is our main point, is to canonicity, which is a meta point of this little series here. What books are part of the canon or not? It is interesting, I think, that as we read, we haven't seen a reference to a story that we don't know. We do in the Torah, we in the Book of Kings is reference to all sorts of, and so it's written in the annals of the kings of Judah or whatever. There's references to things. Devorah, Meneket Rivka, Rebecca's nursemaid, Devorah. We don't have anything about her. She's mentioned that she died. She's buried under a tree. She must be important. We don't have anything about it. Serach Bat Asher, she's in the genealogical list. I'm not talking about the midrashim we have, but there's a lot of things that are referred to. I don't think there's been anything here that's not referred to, which is not in the Hebrew Bible as we know it, which does serve to show at least that much of the canon, the way, or at least part of the canon that we know today, be the canon of the land of Israel, that's the situation here as well. In other words, no reference to other things. But I don't know. That might be too big of a step. I'm sorry to have gone over to overflowed for a few minutes, but we'll begin with chapter 10, and I'll put out a new sheet, which will start with 10 and then go on to the other. I'm going to try to give excerpts instead of reading the whole thing. Otherwise, we'll be here for weeks and weeks. Okay. Thank you for being here again, Sylvia. She should have a refuah shlema, refuat nefesh, refuat aguf. Thank you, Madalena, for facilitating us, and see you all next week, and happy Tu B'Shvat.